So today we're going to talk about why I ditched the bear bag and permanently switched to bear canisters. Hey everyone, Ghostmill here, and welcome back to my channel, Everyday Backpacker. If you watch the channel for a while, you know two things. One, I primarily recreate and live in grizzly country, and two, I recently made the decision to switch from using bear bags to bear canisters. Now, ever since I made the decision to switch from bear bags to bear canisters, a few people have asked me why I made the decision to do that, especially given that I used to be a pretty strong proponent for carrying a bear bag. Well, in order to answer that, I'm going to have to take a quick trip back into history. Now, this is a pretty good time in the video to give a little bit of a disclaimer, because unlike some of my other videos, this is kind of a hot topic issue for me, and so this video could get a little spicy. Now, if you've been backpacking for a while, you have probably come across the name of Andrew Skirka. For those of you that may not know who Andrew Skirka is, he is kind of a backpacker's backpacker. He is known for doing quite a few long distance trails and routes throughout his history, and he's written several books about how to backpack and how to handle your gear. In the early 2000s, he eventually won Outdoor Adventure of the Year award and went on to become a professional backpacking guide. And so a year or two before I made the switch from bag to can, Andrew Skirka put out on his blog an article about why he no longer teaches his clients to use bear bags. The article went on to say that a lot of people were not properly doing bear bags, and it made an argument for why bear bagging was becoming more obsolete and why, for safety reasons, he was going to not continue to use bear bags on his expeditions and instead switch over to bear canisters. Now, when that article first came out, my initial response to it was pretty much skepticism and frankly a little bit of anger, because I had been successfully backpacking in grizzly country for several years, and I've been using a bear bag and I haven't had any issues yet, so I don't understand what the problem is. And so, as I headed out into the backcountry after reading the article, I started paying a little bit closer attention to the way people were hanging their bear bags, mainly because I wanted to prove his premise wrong, because apparently I thought that I was way smarter than the guy who's been internationally known backpacker for many years. And what I observed was frankly pretty shocking. Turns out Andrew might know what he's talking about, because by and large, what I noticed was most people, they can't hang a bear bag to save their life. What I observed deep in the heart of grizzly country were many campsites with bear bags that were frankly not even close to being hung correctly. Bags that were only so high that I, at 6'1", could easily reach them with my hands. Bags all the way up against tree trunks. Bags tied to saplings that were so small I could have pushed them over myself. It was terrible. And it wasn't just people that I would peg as new backpackers. It was people who clearly had been backpacking for a long time. This was pretty pervasive, and it seemed like it was, honestly, complacency at work. And unfortunately, the act of not properly bear bagging is what has kind of gotten us into this impasse to begin with. A perfect example of this is something that happened just this last summer on a trail that I have done multiple times and frankly never seen any signs of bear on. But one day, as we were hiking through, we ran into some other backpackers who told us that at the campsite that we were going to be staying at in a couple days, they had their bag get broken into by a black bear in the camp. And the thing that always stuck out to me about this story is the guy looked me dead in the face and said, "Yeah, we probably didn't really hang that bear bag too well." You think, genius? For once, Chad, I couldn't agree more. Frankly, it is dumb. It's not a really smart decision. And our complacency on these safety procedures is not only dumb, but frankly, it's dangerous. And as we're seeing, there are consequences to that, as statistically there are becoming more and more encounters being brought on by bears that have become habituated to food because of people's bad storage habits. So what causes us to do this, frankly, dangerous behavior? And the simple attitude or answer to that is complacency and general attitude towards safety. I've talked to several backpackers about this very topic, and one of the constant answers that I get from people is, "Well, I've always done it this way and I haven't had any issues. It just works for me." The problem is with bears, you don't usually get a warning or a chance. It only takes one time and you could end up seriously injured or frankly dead. Now back to the guy in that story. As he was leaving, he said, "It's not really that big of a deal, we just lost some food." Well, unfortunately, it can be a big deal because that bear is now going to remember that that little thing hanging in the tree, that little thing is full of tasty num-nums that are easily accessible. And they're going to remember that, especially if she was a female and she has cubs. She's going to teach her cubs that these little things are full of tasty num-nums, and they're also going to remember that. And so eventually, bears will begin to associate them, and unfortunately, they will continue to go after them because they present easy food. Now, fortunately, bear encounters of these kinds are still fairly rare, statistically speaking. They don't happen very often. But unfortunately, this has also contributed to an attitude of it's not really that big of a deal. Another story I have is a really good illustration of that. I work in an outdoor store, and we have customers coming in all the time that argue about whether or not bear safety is a legitimate thing or not. And one that always sticks out in my mind was a gentleman who came from the Midwest. I can make fun of the Midwest because I am originally from the Midwest. I am from Ohio. Aww. He came in and he was going to be hiking in Yellowstone National Park. And he was beside himself upset that the national parks were requiring him to watch this video about bear safety and follow all these rules and carry all of these things because he didn't think it was that big of a deal. Now, in his defense, I will say that when I moved out west from Ohio, I was also very ignorant about what kind of things I was supposed to do in order to be bear conscious because I did not grow up in grizzly country, so I didn't know any issues. The difference is that I learned those things, and this guy's attitude towards it was, it's just a bunch of butt kiss that the government's making us go through, so I don't need to worry about it. Now, being that I work in customer service, I had to, for a little bit at least, bite my tongue because I couldn't just say something to upset this guy other than trying to cajole him into understanding the reason behind it. Unfortunately for him, he opened up the door and he asked me, "What do you think about this? Do you think it's all a bunch of nonsense as well?" That was his mistake because now he's asked my opinion of it. And my opinion of it is something that I was ready to give to him. And I looked him dead in the eye and I said, it's not bumpkins at all because people come from other parts of the country into this area. They don't follow the rules. They get themselves in trouble. They get hurt. They get up dead. The bear has to be killed. And it's just a big issue that we see time and time and time again. And not surprisingly, that wasn't the answer he wanted. He was pretty surprised. Surprisingly, I didn't get a complaint filed against me. I hope my bosses aren't watching this. Anyways, the reality is that we do out here in grizzly country hear about people, both local and people from outside of the area, frankly, that don't do things right and get in trouble. Now, before I go too much further, I have to say that you can do everything right and still get in trouble. There are no guarantees in the backcountry. There's no guarantees that you are going to be 100% safe in bear country. It just doesn't exist. There unfortunately have been people who've done everything right and still gotten in trouble. But the reason why this is so important is because if you do your best to mitigate the chances of having an encounter, the less opportunities you have for an encounter, the more safe you're going to be. And so these things are important because of that reason, because they increase your safety margin over time. And so all of that over time led me to the conclusion that he was absolutely right, Andrew Skirka, that bear bags had, unfortunately, become more of a liability than not, especially in grizzly country, because too many people were being complacent and not doing it properly, and this led to many more encounters and has made it harder for me to feel safe dealing with bear bags. In fact, I found myself actually skipping campgrounds just because of some of the bear bags or poorly hung bear bags that I had seen while out on trips. So, yes, this is a problem. As much as we want to act like it's not, it absolutely is. Now, I have other people say, well, it's okay if you use a bear bag as long as you're using an odor-proof bag, because that will keep the smell in. And even then, aren't the Mountain House and other freeze-dried bags also smell-proof? So what's the problem? All right, let's talk a little bit about smell. When it comes to smell, bears have an incredible ability to smell things. In fact, some biologists believe that their ability to smell is somewhere about the same as a bloodhound. They are incredibly good at smelling things. One of the most striking things that I ever heard on a podcast was a National Park Service's bear biologist who said they did a test to see of different smells and how much of an attractant they were. They put out a capful of Dr. Bronner's peppermint soap and attracted a bear that was tagged, and that bear moved 5 miles to come to smell that particular smell. Yep. And it is true that there are things out there called op sacs or odor-proof sacs that are marketed by Ursac to decrease the amount of smellability. So you store your stuff in that bag, put your food and stuff into that bag, and then put that in your bear bag. And it's designed to not allow the bear to smell the items. And this is true to an extent. It does make it harder for smells to get out, but I don't believe personally that something that can smell as well as a bloodhound is going to be completely blocked of any kind of smell by a little piece of plastic. I could be wrong, but generally speaking, I think that it does decrease the likelihood of them smelling the food, but if they do smell it, there is still the issue of poorly hung bear bag. As far as the food packaging itself being odor-proof, that is 100% a myth, and I can tell you that with perfect certainty based on my own personal experience. Don't believe me? Go to your local store when they get a large shipment of anything from Mountain House or Peak Refuel or anything like that. Go back into their shipping area and take a big old whiff. I guarantee you're gonna smell spices. A bear can, on the other hand, is also not completely odor-proof, but does do a good degree of helping to decrease the amount of smells that do escape it. So now that I've spent a good deal of time talking about why I made the switch and basically poo-pooing bear bagging, let's talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons of bear cans and some of the best practices involved in using them. Because again, just like bear bags, they do require some thought process in how you handle them to make them ultimately safe. That said, though, the device itself is much more secure than a bag. So this brings me to the first pro of the bear can, which is that unlike a bear bag, it is specifically designed and tested to make sure bears can't get into the food that's inside of it. If a bear were to get a hold of a bear bag, the flimsy material is not going to protect it from that animal. Unlike a bear can, which is designed and tested to make sure that it does just that. So in order for a bear can to be certified, it has to go through a testing process. And that testing process is essentially they take one of these, fill it up with the tastiest possible food they can find for a bear, throw it into an enclosure with several grizzly bears, and it has to survive, I think, 2 hours with those bears without the bears being able to get into it, which is, again, a really important feature of the bear canister versus a bear bag. Now there are things out there like Ursacs which do definitely provide more protection than your average bear bag. One thing that they don't protect against is a crushing force. So even though the bear may not actually be able to get into the food, they're basically going to pulverize everything that's inside of it if they get a hold of it. Unlike one of these where, again, it provides a structural rigidity that allows the food to remain relatively unscathed inside of the bear canister. Another pro for me that I found out after using one is the relative ease of using it. So with a bear can, unlike a bear bag, when you get into camp, you don't have to go out and hang a bear line. You don't have to spend time trying to throw something into a tree and going through all that rigmarole. Because frankly, when I get done with a long hike, at the end of the day, the last thing I really want to do is spend a lot of time trying to find a tree that can work, setting up the line, throwing the line up into the tree, making sure everything's getting done, tying it all off. It's frankly kind of a hassle. Whereas with a bear can, all I have to do is screw the lid on, find a suitable place to do it, which we'll talk about in a minute, set it in the ground, boom, done. No effort. It's just a lot easier. And frankly, at the end of a long day, I am pretty lazy, and so I will take ease of setting this out in the field over weight any day. And that'll lead me to some of the cons of bear cans, because again, nothing is perfect. And unfortunately, bear cans have two pretty sizable cons. One is weight, which I'll talk about in a second, and then the other one is the bulk. So as you can see, they're pretty rigid, and so they do make it tougher to put into a pack. In some cases, they have to be shimmied onto the outside of the pack, which because of their weight is not really ideal. There is definitely some workaround to that. For me, though, I found that frankly, it wasn't really that hard for me to work around. With a little bit of changing up my packing system, I was able to get this to fit very easily into a pack. and you know, big things like putting padding between your back and the bear canister, if you can, is a lot more convenient. And then again, some packs that are a little bit smaller. For the larger bear cans, they have straps that you can strap them onto the top. Again, not perfectly ideal, but definitely something to work around. But I'll be the first to admit that it is definitely something we have to consider. And of course, the biggest elephant in the room with these, or a con against this, is the weight. These things are not light. Some of the more basic models can be upwards of 2 pounds. You can get carbon fiber models that are considerably lighter but are considerably more expensive, the $300 to $400 range. And so that is definitely a major issue. I mean, let's face it, one of the main holdups that I had for going with a bear can was when I read that article, I was at that time trying to lighten my load. And how in the world was I ever going to lighten my load by putting one of these into my backpack? It's not light. I want light. This isn't light. It's not convenient for me. And so I will definitely concede that that is a little bit of a stumbling block for some people. So I can only speak from my personal experience. And my personal experience was that when I started using these, I didn't notice really after a while that big of a difference in the weight before and after I started using the bear cam. And with a little bit of time, it just became normal and I didn't even notice it at all. And so I don't think that personally the weight was that big of a hurdle. And if I can speak a little bit frankly, but your name's not Frank, it's Calvin. Anyway, if your main reason for not wanting to carry this is because of the weight, I'm sorry, but to me, you may not like this, but that feels a little bit selfish. Because if you choose not to maintain a certain level of safety, and you go into the backcountry, and you do a poor bear hang, and that bear hang is gotten into by a bear, and then that bear goes over to another camp, finds another one, gets into that food, the person comes along and say that person ends up injured or worse, dead, and then they have to go through and kill the bear, and then you have people that are dead, you have bear that are dead. Was that weight savings worth it? I just can't justify that in my own head. Now, I'm sorry. I'm not here to be confrontational or a Debbie Downer, and I'm not here to point fingers because, frankly, we all need to do better. It's on our shoulders to be able to make sure that we're able to continue to do these activities in these areas and make it safe for not only ourselves, but everyone else involved. And because of that, there are some best practices that go along with using a bear keg as well. And that is things like making sure that you follow the Bermuda Triangle, which is essentially that your cooking area should be approximately 100 plus feet away from where you're camping, and then where you place your bear canister should be an additional 100 feet away from both of those things. You don't want to just because this does keep bears out of it, doesn't mean you just want to go ahead and toss it into your camp and be done with it. You still want to make sure that you're keeping it far enough away and you're putting it into an area that will not invite the bears into the place where the soft, fleshy humans are. Another best practice is, just like with bear bagging, you need to not only put your food in here, but also any other smellables. As I said, soap attracted a bear from 5 miles away. That's a smellable. You need to put that in there. Toothpaste should go in here. Toothbrush probably should go in here. All of those things that can act as an attractant should still be placed into the bear keg, or if it's something that can't be damaged independently, at least set with the bear keg so that, again, it's not inside your camp. An important thing to remember is it's important where you put this because it is not tethered, and a bear that has an encounter with a bear cam, which has happened in the past, they do typically end up moving these. So you don't want to do things like place it near water because it could end up in the water. You also don't want to place it on top of a cliff or a steep descent because it may go over the edge. So just some things that you want to kind of look out for is a possibility of making your life harder than it needs to be later down the road. And there you have it. That's why I made the personal decision to switch from bear bags to bear kegs. Now, all that said, I'm not here to tell you how you should or shouldn't do things. That's up to you what you want to do. And if you want to carry a bear bag, okay then. But I do think it's important that everyone takes a minute to review the best practices and try our best to be able to do that. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about your safety, it's about all of our safety. And we all need to do better. And if we don't do better, unfortunately, this situation has a pretty steep consequence to it. And unfortunately, because of those steep consequences and the increased number of incidents that are occurring every year, more and more land managers are switching over to requiring bear canisters in the backcountry. This is a trend that I don't see ending anytime soon, and unfortunately is something that we're just going to have to get used to as backcountry recreationalists. And so all that said, I'll go ahead and get off of my soapbox, or in this case, my bear canister. And if you disagree with me, that's fine. I understand. Not everybody thinks the same way, and we all have different practices. The only thing I ask that you take away from this video is we all can do better at being safe, and it would behoove all of us to review what we do, how we do it, and what the possible consequences of those can be. Now, I no doubt don't have to say anything about leaving a comment below because I feel like this video is going to elicit that anyways. The only thing I ask, as always, is just keep it kind and civil, and I will be happy to respond to you. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep hiking on.